Well, thank you very much for inviting me on board.
Yeah, man, I'm very excited to have you here. I feel like I've been learning a lot combing through your work and the resistance you've put up to the medical machine. And I think if we're going to do this right, we have to lay a base explaining to people what they've been denied. And that's the information about GcMAF. Tell us about this particular protein.
Okay, well, GcMAF is a human protein. It's a human body part and a human right. We all make it if we're healthy. But disease can block its production. So although 5 billion healthy people have GcMAF inside them, there are about 1 billion who can't make it because the disease blocks it. It treats 50 diseases that we know of successfully, including terminal stage 4 cancer. It was discovered 25 years ago. And since then, 200 scientists have written scientific research papers on it, so it's quite a well-understood molecule. Mm-hmm. And we've supplied 9,000 people through about 350 doctors, so it's got quite a good basis in the scientific and medical worlds.
Right on. So this is something that the body does produce naturally, but also you've been able to, I guess, synthesize it or extract it and also provide it as a medicine?
Yes, we extract it and we supply it as a protein. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And tell us about the body's production of it. Where does this happen? Is there a limited supply?
Well, GC protein, which is also called vitamin D binding protein, is about 3% of our blood, and it's made in the liver. 1 billionth of a gram of your GC protein is converted into GcMAF in your body. And what actually happens is a T cell from the immune system comes along, takes one sugar off a GC protein molecule, and then a T cell comes along, so you've got a B and a T cell, takes off another sugar molecule, and the remaining molecule is then a GcMAF molecule with only one remaining sugar molecule attached to it. So that's how the body makes it. And of course, 1 billionth of a gram is a tiny amount, but it has a massive effect on the body, and the immune system doesn't work without it.
This was discovered 25 years ago. Who discovered it? And I mean, there has to be indications that there's been some kind of marginalization or quarantine around this information, because it seems to be something that spits right in the face of the big pharmaceuticals.
Yes, they don't like it at all. There were a number of scientists working on something called CSF1 in the 1980s. And in 1990, the scientist, Dr. Yamamoto, PhD, renamed it GcMAF. And since then, there have been 200 scientists involved. So it's been concealed from the public for 25 years by the medical and pharmaceutical industries.
Right. So what does GcMAF look like under the microscope? Have you watched it actually go toe-to-toe with diseases and fight illness?
Well, the nearest thing we've done to that is extracting GcMAF is a 22-step process. It's very, very easy to get wrong. So unless it's tested, you have no idea that you actually made GcMAF at the end of it. We actually put our batches through 9 tests. And the first 2 are sterility, but the last 3 are activity, because the last 2 are the most interesting. We take human breast cancer cells and put them in a petri dish. We then add human immune system macrophages. Absolutely nothing happens. We then add the latest batch of GcMAF, and that activates the macrophages, and in 3 days the macrophages eat all the cancer cells. And we published that in a video which we put on YouTube. We got 5,000 hits in the first year. Gwen Stefani sang my favorite rock song at the same time, It's My Life. She got 2 million hits. Yeah. So the final experiment we do is exactly the same experiment, but we forget to add the macrophages. So we have human breast cancer cells in a petri dish, nothing happens. We add the GcMAF, and now the cancer cells cannot be eaten because there are no macrophages there. So the GcMAF turns the cancer cells back into normal, healthy cells. And again, it takes 3 days. And again, we put it on YouTube, and we got even less hits on now. I think we got about 1,000.
Wow, man. So a 22-step process. Are you extracting this from healthy people who are producing a lot of it?
No. We actually make 1,000 times as much as is normally there. So there's a fairly limitless supply, in other words.
Right on. So where does Nagalase come into the picture? Because this is the flip side of the coin, if I understand correctly.
Right. So if you get weak, your house gets repossessed, or you get pneumonia, or something goes wrong, that gives disease a chance to grow and take a hold. And if it grows enough, that disease can send out the enzyme Nagalase, which blocks production of your body's GcMAF. And so Nagalase is basically all bad. You don't want any of that.
Gotcha. So this sounds like an incredibly important medical discovery. I am a little curious, do we come in contact with Nagalase any other way besides something that viruses produce in the body?
That's the only place that we know of it. I mean, there are a number of diseases which are very clever things. They know that in order to enter the body, they have to destroy your body's defenses. And the defense they destroy is your GcMAF. And there are 1 billion people in the world who just can't make GcMAF because they've got too much Nagalase in their body.
Fascinating, man. And so if they had the GcMAF, that would be a complete Nagalase inhibitor that would keep it from taking root in the body at all.
Oh, yes. GcMAF will prevent the production of Nagalase. And that is why the diseases have to wait until your body becomes weak, because if your GcMAF is strong, it will defeat the Nagalase.
Wow, yeah. So GcMAF sounds like the holy grail here, like the true engine of the immune system. It's surprising that this was kept quiet for so long, but I guess one criticism that comes up in these situations where we're given new medical information and something is being sold and it sounds a bit like a miracle cure, it works on so many things, critics say the body is too complex and there just aren't any miracle cures. I'm sure you've faced those types of criticisms before, but how do you typically respond to that?
Well, GcMAF is a natural protein which helps the body cure itself. It's as simple as that. It has no side effects. It is the king of immunotherapies.
And are there ways we can increase our GcMAF production naturally in the body? If it is a natural thing, how can we make sure we have enough of it to not get diseases?
Well, if you're healthy, your GcMAF will be healthy. So you've just got to live a healthy lifestyle. Don't eat too much sugar because that causes a number of diseases. In fact, cancer only eats sugar. And there are a lot of diseases that depend on sugar to exist. Tobacco is not the big problem here. Cancer does not eat tobacco. It does eat sugar.
Wow, yeah, I'd heard people say that too. I wondered exactly how much truth there was to it. Also, I've heard if you keep your body in an alkaline state, that too will make an environment where cancer can't really survive.
That's right. There are over a dozen ways of curing cancer, and that is one of them. And normally, if you're not using GcMAF, you've got to put 5 or 6 of them together to succeed. But GcMAF has 20 brilliant actions in the body. 2 everyone knew. It rebuilds the immune system and it activates macrophages. But we've published 32 research papers. Of the 120 research papers published on GcMAF, embarrassingly large, 32 of them are ours. And when we saw those experiments where we test for the activity and we could see the cancer being eaten and the cancer tumors being turned back into healthy cells, we then realized more was happening than just those 2 things. We then did experiments where we found that GcMAF inhibits angiogenesis, that is to say, it stops the blood supply to tumors. It causes apoptosis, suicide of cancer cells. It reverts the cancer cell phenotype to normal cells. That's where it turns cancer cells into healthy cells. And it reduces the metastatic potential of human cancer cells. So that is to say, it stops secondaries. But it also does a few other things unrelated to cancer. It increases energy production at the mitochondrial level, which is relevant for ME/CFS and also for autism. It improves human neuronal metabolic activity through CAMP signaling, which is relevant for autism, ME/CFS, multiple sclerosis, and ALS. It counters toxic effects, including cadmium, and it abolishes neuropathic pain due to neurooxidative stress. So there are 11 things we've already published that GcMAF does.
Wow, man. It seems like, yeah, it's a real seriously important protein that hasn't been talked about a whole lot. And you mentioned having a healthy diet. What is eating healthy? Of course, no sugars, but what does that mean to you? Because we hear so many different ideas of what eating right really is. And unfortunately, we don't get any real education about that growing up with all the hours we put in. Do you subscribe to a vegetarian diet? Do you think meat is important? What's a good diet in your eyes?
Well, firstly, food is your medicine and medicine is your food. You know, it really is. It's far more important than drugs. If you want to cure yourself of a disease, food is far more important than any drug that's ever been made. And in fact, if you get your food right, you won't catch any disease at all. But we have found with all our patients except autism, they pretty well all have low levels of vitamin D. So we always recommend 10,000 IU of vitamin D a day. Don't eat sugar. Don't eat carbohydrates, because carbohydrates turn into sugar in your body. And eat meat, fish, and vegetables, salads, eggs, proteins. That's the perfect diet. And of course, 10,000 years ago, that is the diet we used to eat, the caveman diet. We invented farming 10,000 years ago. There was no cancer at all before farming. Farming brought it on. As the first cancers found in bones thousands of years old was 10,000 years ago when farming started. And then 150 years ago, when we started eating sugar, the amount of cancer shot up again. And then when we started using frequencies in our houses, like telephone base stations and telephones against our ears and all those sort of things, then it took the curve of cancer took another curve upwards. So that's what causes cancer.
Right, yeah, there's so many poisons in our society currently. I definitely think the cell phone thing has some legitimacy. It's sad, though, because I use it constantly, and I'm in a bit of a denial about the fact that it might be harming me in a pretty serious way. But you mentioned vitamin D being important here, and vitamin D binding protein is what makes GcMAF. Does sunlight help at all?
Yes, you need sunlight. And, you know, all these scare stories about melanoma, which I have to say GcMAF cures pretty easily, you know, you shouldn't listen to them. We need sunlight because that's where our vitamin D comes from.
Right, yeah, very important. I've also heard some researchers equate being held in a cubicle 5 days a week during the whole duration of sunlight hours is almost like poisoning us because our health relies on that connection so much. I've also been told sitting under fluorescent lights all day isn't great for our body either.
Well, you may well be right, although I have to say I know nothing about that, so I'm not really qualified to comment.
Sure, fair, man. Yeah, neither am I. I'm just talking about things I read online. But let me ask you to elaborate perhaps on Big Pharma's suppression of this information for the last 2.5 decades. Seems like such a disservice to humanity. How have they kept this information from circulating for so long?
Well, the only place it's been published over the last 25 years is in scientific research papers. All of those are peer-reviewed and published in the world's top scientific journals. And the